The late, great Tina Turner once asked, "What's love got to do with it?" Well, today's guest on the DesuckifyWork Podcast, Meredith Bell, has the answer. And it's everything. Meredith is a leadership and communications expert and co-founder of Grow Strong Leaders. And she firmly believes that love is at the center of all we do when we're doing work that matters. Love at work? That makes me kind of uncomfortable, dude. Well, it shouldn't, once you understand what it really means. It means caring deeply about people's well-being and practicing small acts of patience, optimism, and kindness every day. It means recognizing the infinite value in every person and letting that guide your interactions. It means asking curious questions and truly listening to help resolve conflicts and create psychological safety. And it requires letting go of judgment, control, ego, to embrace humility and commitment to others' growth. If we do all of that, we'll reduce the unnecessary pain and drama at work. That's at the heart of Meredith's work with leaders, helping folks learn to lead from love by developing critical communication and character skills. Yes, character is a skill, and we can all develop it through regular practice. Even that guy who starts every meeting by making fart sounds with his hands. Especially that guy. What's love got to do with it? Let's find out, shall we? Okay, Meredith Bell, welcome to the DesuckifyWork Podcast.
Well, TJ, it's great to be with you today. I'm excited about our conversation.
I think it's going to be really fun. You've got so much good stuff for us to dig into between your books and the offerings in your own podcast, or just you've got a new offering coming out. I think we'll try to touch on everything as best we can and see where the conversation takes us.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, Meredith, do you want to take a minute to just give us the quick story of who you are, what you do, and how you came to be doing it?
Sure. Well, if you go way back, I was an elementary school teacher in my first career.
Nice.
I'd always wanted to be a teacher, but I found I got kind of bored with the lessons being repeated. So I got my master's, went into school board office level positions, and realized after a few years of that, I don't do politics or bureaucracy very well either. So I went off on my own with no business background. And my passion had always been around people. And so I decided I was going to help companies learn how to have people play well together and focus on communication skills, because that's where we seem to have so many challenges. And that's really been my focus all these years. I did solo training and consulting for a number of different companies. And then in 1990, I met Denny Coates, who was also a solo consultant. We started collaborating on some projects and decided we were compatible in all the important ways for business, and merged two firms and brought in a third partner, Paula, and the three of us have now worked together for 32 years. So what happened is we decided to pivot from being a consulting and training company to being a software company when we had a need for a certain product ourselves. And that was for 360-degree feedback, which was in the early 90s was a fairly new technology, getting input from people other than your boss to find out where your strengths are and where people would like you to make some changes. And offerings that were out there at the time didn't meet our needs because we wanted something customizable. So we hired a software developer, created that program, and it's now been on the market. Not that specific product, but we have been in the 360 business for 30 years. So we know that really well. And we've also always been about development. So it isn't just assessing somebody, but what do you do with this information? So we written books and we have created products around communication skills. And the new one that you alluded to includes character skills. So we can look at that later. But our overall mission is really to help leaders learn how to be more effective in their roles, to reduce and eliminate the pain, the unnecessary pain and drama that happens in too many workplaces because people simply know how to do things a different way.
Wow. Well, if we can crack that code, that would be phenomenal. And it sounds like you've certainly helped a lot of people. You've been doing this for a little bit. You've been doing it with some pretty good people, some people who have some influence. So I imagine the results have been multiplied in many ways. And I love the notion of eliminating some of that drama, especially the unnecessary drama, right? I think we've all felt that. Like occasionally there's real differences of opinion, and that can result in some heated emotions. And that I think can be okay if you're managing those emotions. But it's all the like, why are we even fighting about this? Why is this even happening? Stuff. I come from the world of advertising. I'm sure anybody from that world who's listening is just nodding their head like, God, if we could get rid of even half of that, it would be phenomenal. So what have you seen that works to help get rid of some of that?
Well, let's talk first about what causes some of that.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is our egos.
Yeah.
You know, we want to be right. We want to have control. We don't want to be seen as weak or wrong. Yeah. And so all of these things about how we are appearing to others can get in the way of the things that are needed in order to make those changes. So if we recognize we don't know it all, we don't have to know it all, we can, adopt a humble attitude. And that isn't being, meek and mild. That is being willing to say, I don't know. Right? Or I know with this without concerned. And also, when I think about where so many of the areas of friction happen, TJ, it's around conversations where one person wants one thing and one person thinks they want something different. And they jump into arguing their points of view, their positions, instead of curiosity. I think there were more curiosity, genuine curiosity about what another person thinks and also who they are. Because, we can melt away a lot of the resistance, a lot of the negative emotions when the other person feels we've got their back, we care about them, and they don't feel threatened by us. There's this term psychological safety that is an important concept. And a lot of it goes back to, do I feel that I can be honest with you? If I feel safe, yes, I'll speak my mind. But if I don't, I'm going to hold back. I'm going to withhold information that maybe you need. And so there's these unhealthy dynamics that can happen if people don't feel that they are genuinely cared about, and they're going to be, the other person's going to have their back. I just think that's a key point.
Yeah, I mean, that is huge. There's two things that I want to touch on. The first thing you said, which is interesting as you led into this last point, was the notion that we feel like we have to be right. And that, as a leader, particularly maybe as an emerging leader, but I think it stays with us if we don't sort of gain the emotional intelligence to deal with this. We wonder if we're up to the task as a leader. Sometimes we get promoted and we're like, and I think we translate that into, if we are wrong or if we don't have an answer, people are going to sort of find us out. It's that imposter syndrome thing. And they're going to be like, oh, we made a mistake. You shouldn't be a leader, or you shouldn't be a leader at that level. And it's going to be taken away. And then as that leader, you're showing up being all the things that you said you shouldn't be. You're showing up without curiosity. You're showing up being very protective of yourself and not willing to let your guard down, willing to admit that you don't know something. And that just snowballs into stuff. And then you're not even in the space to then get to the place of, can I get curious about this other person? Can I create psychological safety? Because you don't even feel safe as a leader to be yourself until you then create this really complicated dynamic that basically means nobody feels safe, nobody's telling each other the truth, and nobody's learning and growing. Do you Do you find leaders showing up working with you with some of what I alluded to in the first part there, which is this fear of looking bad? And does that hinder all the other stuff?
Well, it can be. And, as I was listening to describe a new leader having all these thoughts,
Yeah.
it's like, well, no wonder they feel immense pressure and stress.
Yeah.
And next thing I thought of was, these are all just thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
Believe these things about ourselves, about others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the most important things we can do is recognize my thoughts are not me. My thoughts don't need to be believed. They're just thoughts. And it's helped me so much over the years to think of thoughts like clouds that are passing by in the sky, and so they don't mean anything as far as who you really are, because if you have this thought, oh, maybe I'm really not cut out for this, then we can into a downward spiral, thinking I'm going to lose my job and catastrophizing all these things. Whereas if we say, okay, that's a thought I'm having, but what's the truth about that thought? Because we can refute these thoughts. If, we can look at the other side saying, I was promoted to this position because they saw value in me. And I do have value. And I start looking at the things that lead me to feeling more confident. And when I feel more confident and secure in who I am far less threatened by what other people will tell me.
Yeah.
I'm more open to hearing others because I don't take it personally. And I think it's really the key. If I find myself reacting inside with wanting to defend or justify, or argue, then I have learned to pause and just take a moment to say, what's going on? Why am I feeling attacked or feeling like, because these are just words that somebody is saying. They don't have to have power. And I think that thinking about where are we coming from in terms of how we're approaching our work. And I'll just give you a simple example of something I do every day. I have certain declarations that I make about who I am. I write in my journal every day. I create myself every day in what I say. And so one of my daily declarations is, I am absolute calmness, clarity, and confidence. Now, that helps me because a few years ago, because I've been saying that one a long time, but a few years ago, I was doing a presentation internationally on Zoom, and my internet went out. And so it didn't come back in time. So I'm doing a plan B about getting my phone set up and getting the host to manage the slides and all of this. And the gal that was the coordinator and the host said, how are you staying so calm through all this? And I shared this declaration with her. I said, this is where I'm coming from. I'm coming from calmness. So I don't have to get rattled about this. That's what I mean by coming from. It's who am I wanting to be in a given moment? If I want to be patient, if I want to be loving, then responding with irritation is not consistent with who I am desiring to be. And as we practice these behaviors, we ingrain that in our brain, and that becomes our natural, comfortable way of being.
That's fascinating. I mean, I think maybe a lot of folks have probably heard something like that idea before, but the simplicity with which you execute this idea of coming from this place of calmness and confidence, that it sounds so simple, but yet it sounds really effective. How quickly was it effective for you? I guess is a good question.
Part of it is the gap between what I really believe about myself. We might say an aspiration that you have. And so it's, if you think about it, TJ, we all in our essence are these good things. We've just overlooked them or not practice them. We've practiced other things for a longer period of time. And where we get into trouble, I think, is labeling ourselves like, well, I'm just impatient. I don't have time for people that just go on and on. Well, that is a choice.
Yeah.
If I say I'm impatient, I can choose to be different in a given moment. And I think that's the thing. As we practice these moments of being a specific way with someone, then it becomes a more natural part of who we are. I'll give you another example just in terms of practicing. This is related to appreciating other people. Okay. And I learned this from Dan Sullivan years ago. He's the CEO of Strategic Coach. And he talked about appreciation as it relates to people in a couple of ways that I hadn't heard about before. And this is over 10 years ago. So this has been cooking in my brain, being practiced a lot. Yeah. It's amazingly effective. And this is applicable for every single leader who's listening to this, especially thinking about someone who tends to have friction with you. They kind of, when you hear you've got a call with them or something, you kind of go, oh. Uh-oh. Yeah. So here's what Dan said. There are two kinds of appreciation. One is we think of things like stocks or real estate appreciating in value.
Right.
And so in that way, what if we thought about people appreciating in value? What if we thought and believed that we have the ability to help others appreciate their own value? And then the other piece of it is appreciating where somebody who's kind of a scout in a war zone goes out to get the lay of the land, to appreciate what's going on there. And that has to do with looking at the importance of the various elements. So when you think about applying this to people and you're getting ready to meet with someone, reflect on their importance to you and even make a list of 8 things that you value about this person. Because what happens is then when you actually meet with them, you're not naming these things to them. It's a way of preparing yourself to have a positive encounter with this person. And so if we're thinking about the things we value and why they're important to us, then our interaction with them is on a whole different level.
Yeah.
They feel that difference in our attitude and our energy with them. Yeah. And so what happens as a result of going through this process is they appreciate and value in our own minds, but they also appreciate and value in their own minds because of how they feel after interacting with us.
Wow. That's really awesome. I mean, it reminds me, I was doing a training yesterday on an assessment that I'm going to be working with, and they were training us around this idea of, how can you be grateful for people who show up with sort of the opposite side of the spectrum in this assessment, and it was really interesting because they basically had to kind of read some of the traits of this person, this hypothetical person. And I had some initial bristling of oh, I don't like that, and then I remembered the exercise. It's okay, let's think about how I can be grateful for these traits. And just that mindset shift was immediately powerful. But then the actual act of saying or writing down, I am grateful for this trait because it helps me, blah, blah, blah. And so the idea that you might be meeting with somebody and everybody eventually runs into those folks who just, for whatever reason, we just don't quite connect, to find some way of finding value in that person, shifting from a sort of animosity mindset to a value mindset. Yeah, I can imagine your appreciation changes. And of course, that energy and that feeling that comes through in that conversation. Yeah, it only makes sense that they would feel that, and how much that dynamic then changes between the two of you from that simple act. Yeah, I mean, these kinds of things, they're so powerful, so simple. And there's a word that you've mentioned a few times that I think may show up more is this word of practice, because I think so much of this, it's about practice, because maybe you try these things once and it has some effect, but making them part of the way you are, the way you work, the way you choose to show up, as you talked about. That practice kind of rewires the brain and says, okay, that old mindset, let's get rid of that and let's fill it with this mindset. In your experience, as you worked with folks, and you've worked with a lot of folks, and you worked with a lot of folks for a long period of time. I think you've got some folks you've worked with for 20 plus years. How open are folks to diving into the practice of things versus wanting the quick fix,
Well, yes. That varies,
Mm-hmm.
what we've really come to realize in terms of organizations as a whole. Our
Mm-hmm.
ideal clients have leaders who understand the value of people and
Mm-hmm.
invest in their development.
Yeah.
It's the contrast, but in advertising, you'll appreciate this, the idea of convincing versus being compelling.
Mm.
And so when you're trying to convince someone, they don't believe or they're skeptical about what you have to say.
Yep.
And so that's an uphill climb. And
Mm-hmm.
so if someone is open to learning and
Mm-hmm.
is eager to learn, then what we have to say is more compelling to them because they are already of that
Mm-hmm.
mindset
Mm-hmm.
where matter. It's
Yeah.
important for us to invest in them because it's going to serve us well in the long term. They take a long-term view. They
Mm.
have a deep valuing of people. So in a similar way, when you think about people who are willing to do the practice or not, people who are open,
Mm-hmm.
who have that learner mindset as opposed to the closed fixed mindset,
Mm-hmm.
that is the difference. If somebody is saying, well, that's just the way I am, I can't do anything about it,
Mm-hmm.
that kind of shouts out, victim, victim, it's all happening to me,
Yeah.
versus I take ownership for my behavior, for what I do, for the results that I get. And
Mm-hmm.
so in someone who's willing to take that approach is going to exercise the focus, the discipline, whatever is needed to practice something.
Mm.
Because if you think about it, I like to use a road analogy. The
Okay.
habits we have and what we do automatically in the way we respond, let's say whether it's being impatient or critical or whatever it might be,
Mm-hmm.
that's like a superhighway that we've built over time. It's automatic. We don't have to think about it. We just do it. When
Mm-hmm.
we're going to do something new, that's like a dirt road, a gravel road with lots of bumps, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not comfortable. And
Yeah.
so it's really tempting to get off of that uncomfortable road back over onto our superhighway because it's what
Yeah.
we know we get there faster.
Mm-hmm.
But what is required is that commitment
Mm-hmm.
to stay with it over time and keep practicing because eventually you'll build another superhighway and the one you're not using as much will go into disrepair. And so the new one will
Mm-hmm.
now become your automatic way of doing it. It's
Mm-hmm.
worth it over time, but
Yeah.
it's like health habits, eating habits, whatever it might be.
Mm-hmm.
There are a number of leadership behaviors that can be learned when they're practiced enough over time.
Do you mentioned sort of the growth mindset, and then there's kind of a more fixed mindset. And I'm imagining people listening might hear those terms and go, yeah, but where I work, everybody's got a fixed mindset. Like that's like, sometimes that's a default reaction. Like I want to grow, but nobody else does. And I think we can probably talk about why that's probably wrong, but let's just assume that there's some truth to it, that some portion of the culture is at least led by more of a fixed mindset. Is there hope in that situation? And if there is, how do you lead somebody or pull somebody more towards the world of growth mindset?
I think a lot of it starts with me, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have to say, the people around me may not be this way, but that doesn't determine how I am going to be. So I take 100% ownership for my
Mm-hmm.
own behavior. And this to me is where curiosity comes in. And such another important piece is non-judgmental. So
Mm-hmm.
we're not trying to make someone wrong. So when we have someone that's got this fixed mindset, there's a reason that is driving them. And I'm not suggesting we need to become psychologists or anything,
Yeah.
but it helps us understand others and be more patient, be more tolerant of
Mm-hmm.
these perspectives. So again, if we don't see, because a natural inclination is to get frustrated with someone like that. So if we can
Yeah.
let go of being frustrated, let go of the past feelings we've had about them, and
Mm-hmm.
go talk to them with an open mind and simply say, we've had disagreements on this issue. I
Mm-hmm.
really want to understand where you're coming from. It's obviously really important to you. And
Mm-hmm.
so talk to me about
Mm-hmm.
why this matters so much to you that we do it this way or that we
Yeah.
not try this,
Mm-hmm.
because I want to learn from you. I know I can learn from you. So we
Mm-hmm.
recognize that value that that
Yeah.
person has. And then we honestly keep an open mind and
Mm-hmm.
listen. And, that's the other thing, TJ, that is such a huge element of all of this is a willingness to listen.
Mm-hmm.
Listen to understand, listen to really get the other person so
Mm-hmm.
they feel felt.
Yeah.
When someone else feels felt, the power, I can't even express it. It's off the scale
Mm-hmm.
because hardly anybody does it.
Yeah.
You know, we think we're pretty good listeners, but usually we're waiting for our turn to speak, or
Mm-hmm.
we're preparing an answer. So we
Mm-hmm.
miss some of what someone is saying. We're distracted by external things or even our internal thoughts
Mm-hmm.
about evaluating what they're saying. And instead, if we can really listen to get that person, the resistance tends to fall away when
Mm-hmm.
as people feel more understood, that you're not in a battle with them, that you are trying to be on the same side as them. So how
Mm-hmm.
can we come together to
Mm-hmm.
jointly work out something that's really, acceptable and workable for both of us?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
it's not 100% guarantee, but
Right.
it is 100% guarantee that you're not going to get any further if you
Mm-hmm.
continue perhaps
Well.
what you've been doing, trying to convince them you're right. But if
Mm-hmm.
you take an approach, it's amazing how when someone feels understood, they're more willing to listen to another perspective.
Mm. Yeah. God, again, there's so much in there. I mean, it starts with, you know, getting yourself out of the victim mindset, which I love. It's like it's very easy to adopt that mindset when we're struggling, and there's a lot of struggling going on right now. And the idea that we have some power,
Yes.
through our actions and through how we choose to show up, and that we have the ability to invite people in to this world we're trying to create for ourselves, right? I want to be this, I want to be calm and I want to be confident and all that. Like, okay, show up that way. And that's basically now an invitation for other people to join your world of calmness and confidence. And then I think, and I think you're starting to lean into some of those communication skills, which I would definitely want to get into, but that idea of listening to understand and being very curious. It's remarkably hard if we don't sort of set our mind right because of all the things we've talked about. There's pressure to be right. There's pressure to not sort of look like we're doing a bad job and all that stuff. So we want to look smart. But if you can really embrace that mindset of listening, it has the effect on yourself, and then the effect of somebody else really feeling heard, which, as you said, we just don't get that very often, in our lives,
Mhm.
that's really powerful. And underneath all of this, there is an undercurrent. There's a word that I'm feeling, coming from how you're approaching this and what you're sort of trying to put into the world. And the word is love. I feel that through all of this. I think you personally are showing up with love, and you're also talking about ways any of us can show up with love. What does that word mean to you in the work context, and how does it define some of the work you're doing?
Yeah. Thank you for that question.
Mm.
Because love really is underlying everything.
Mm-hmm.
And what I mean is caring at a deep level about another person's well-being,
Mm-hmm.
so that I'm not talking in any sense, of course, in a romantic sense
Yeah.
at work, but the value of someone else. And I know I've used that word, but
Mm-hmm.
all of us have incredible value. And
Mm-hmm.
it's easy to toss that aside when we're in conflict with someone and we feel like they are creating pain for us.
Mm-hmm.
When in fact, when we take full responsibility, no one else can make us feel anything.
Mm-hmm.
It's our thoughts about what is happening in the given moment that
Mm-hmm.
create our feelings.
Yeah.
And so if we can recognize that, and I think it goes down to, at its core essence, love is recognizing that every human being has infinite value and
Mm-hmm.
worth
Mm-hmm.
just because they are,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah.
And so that belief, that acceptance of that, then guides how I'm going to interact with someone else.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to be sarcastic with them. I'm not going to put them down. I'm not going to embarrass them in front of other people
Mm-hmm.
just so I can look good if I
Mm-hmm.
truly care about their well-being and
Mm-hmm.
who they are. So I think it's one of those attitudes that we bring to
Mm-hmm.
others, and they feel that just like they feel our animosity
Yeah.
or our aggravation or our anger,
Mm-hmm.
any of those negative emotions that we feel. We are all an energy field.
Mm-hmm.
However you want to describe that, we are emitting some kind of energy to other people. We all have had experience picking up bad vibes or
Absolutely.
good vibes
Yep.
from someone else. These aren't imaginary. We're feeling beings, and so we
Mm-hmm.
sense these things.
Yeah.
And I think if we can become more self-aware, because I think that's really the crux of so much of this,
Mm-hmm.
aware of ourselves, who we are being in the moment. It doesn't mean we're going to be perfect. I blow things at different times because I'm not going to always show up this way. But
Yeah.
at least these guiding principles prevent me from, stepping on my feet or other people's feet.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, when we do come across in a way we don't want to make amends, to apologize and make things right as quickly as we can, I think is another key element of good leadership.
Mm.
That often leaders are reluctant to apologize for
Yeah.
fear of looking weak,
Yep.
or being respected less. But I am here to tell you, I'll stomp on my fist on the table about it, that the more you resist apologizing, the harder it's going to be to connect with other people and
Mm-hmm.
create that psychological safety. Because if they see you where they know you've made a mistake and you're not willing to own up to it, well, then
Mm-hmm.
they're going to start hiding stuff from you so they
Mm-hmm.
don't get caught making
Yeah.
mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas we just say, I really messed up. I shouldn't have said this. I apologize. How can I make it right?
Mm-hmm.
If you've done something where you've really hurt someone's feelings or you've created some
Yeah.
damage, how can I make it right? It's
Mm-hmm.
amazing those few simple words do to
Mm-hmm.
repairing the relationship, because the other person sees that, number one, you're taking ownership for it, and number two, you recognize some damage has been done and
Mm-hmm.
you want to clean it up.
Mm-hmm.
And so being willing to say those words at times shows, again, all of this can reflect love for the other person. You love the relationship, you care deeply about it. And
Mm-hmm.
so you want to nurture it and help it grow, not undermine it. And so
Yeah.
all of the elements to me go into this aspect of what real love is for other people.
Mm. Yeah. It's interesting as you're saying that. What's showing up for me is the idea, your idea around creating your reality, and the idea that if we allow ourselves to stay in this creation of fear, which a lot of folks will say that's kind of the opposite of love is fear. And that's fear of looking bad, fear of looking weak. That's just going to keep perpetuating in our life. And so we're going to put it out there. And then as people are coming to us as a leader, the people who work for us or with us are going to be showing up from a place of fear because that's what we've created. But if you create from a place of love and your willingness to be vulnerable and your willingness to actually be strong and admit, okay, I've obviously done something here that's hurt you in some way. How can I fix this? How can I make it better? How can I make this up? That energy now is going to show up much more. And, maybe it's not a perfect world that you're creating, but I just can imagine the world that you're putting in love, you're going to get a lot more sort of that created around you. And that's like, again, it's sort of simple. It's hard. But I think the simplicity of it allows you to at least try it. Like why not try showing up with your willingness to be a little more vulnerable and to act from love and see how it goes based off of that. Do you sense that people, leaders, and I think about all that fear of looking weak, what helps them make the connection that in fact you're stronger if you show up from a place of love rather than a place of fear?
The results you get, the responses you get from those people around you. And, there's another element here besides apologizing, another key character skill, if you will, is forgiveness. Being willing to say, it's okay.
Yeah.
So that I understand you made a mistake or you said something that I was hurt by, and I'm willing to forgive you. I'm also willing to forgive myself for judging, because we do so much judging of ourselves, of other people. If we could, in fact, my 4 favorite words are love more, judge less.
Yeah.
Because if you just start monitoring your thoughts on a daily basis of all the things you judge about yourself and about other people, when you see a stranger, at the grocery store, that person is thin, fat. I mean, we just have all these thoughts that run through our heads.
Yeah.
And if we can start having the lens, if you will, of love rather than judgment, and the willingness to let go quickly, because everybody is human. We're all going to make mistakes. We're all on this journey of, travels with bumpy roads and mistakes. And so it's just part of the human experience.
Yeah.
And so I think it's when we get our expectations so high. I know for myself, I have high standards for myself. And so I have them for other people.
Yep.
And when I find myself getting least tolerant of others, it's usually something I've done or not done myself, where I'm not feeling good about how I'm being in a particular situation or context. And so I'm looking outward at what's wrong with these other people. And so as soon as I start doing that, I've grown enough to realize, all right, Meredith, slow down, stop, take a look. What's going on with you? Before I start mentally pointing fingers at other people. I don't know if you watched Ted Lasso.
Oh my gosh, yeah. His name has showed up in my head as you've been talking. Yes.
Because my husband and I binge watched that, in a period of just a few weeks. But and that is a beautiful illustration of an organization where people came to love each other. All those players, all the coaches, there was this deep caring. And part of the strength that Ted Lasso has is his willingness to forgive so quickly and easily to things that were really, when you look at it, you think, wow, that was a big deal. And he's just willing to let it go.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of his strengths. It can be our strength too. We all have that ability to be generous with others and give them space to be human, to make mistakes. And I think that's where on our teams, leaders, if they're feeling themselves being intolerant of mistakes of their team members, it's time to look within and say, where am I judging myself so harshly and not giving myself any slack?
Yeah.
Because it's hard to give to others what you cannot give yourself.
Well, yeah, I think, again, a simple sort of shift, but I can already picture it. I can picture myself leading a team and just how different it feels if you make that shift to looking within when you're feeling some frustration outwardly, and how, if nothing else, it gives you pause and a chance to be a little bit more self-aware. And hopefully it leads to you to maybe think, okay, what can I do to show up better? And if I'm judging myself, do I need to judge myself so harshly? And if I don't judge myself so harshly, will that then hopefully limit my harsh judgment of other people? And then I think about the Ted Lasso example, and there's something, he was so beautifully consistent in showing up with that mindset of love, right? It was like, even as others around him weren't there with him,
Yes.
to the point where people sort of were like, oh, that goofy, naive guy from America. But yet, you get towards the end of that show and you realize, like, everybody, he helped create this world where everyone from, the team owner to everyone else who was maybe struggling with different things, everybody was in that space by the end. And so that's a pretty powerful sort of, fictional, but a great model for us. And I want to get
possible.
in.
It is possible. And I think one of the things that I think could help a new leader, especially, but other people who are experienced, is simply be open with your team from the beginning and say, how do we want to behave with each other?
Yeah.
How do we want to be? So we set these guidelines. We don't have to call them rules, like you broke a rule, but what are the agreements that we're going to have with each other?
Yeah.
That we break them, or are not living up to them, we're willing to speak up, including making it safe for people to say to the leader,
right,
you fell short on that. And that willingness to have that kind of open dialogue up front helps you establish values, norms that you're going to live by. And so if everyone agrees to that and says we're going to hold each other accountable for that, that to me raises the level of performance of that group, because they have set a standard for themselves that they're going to hold themselves to. And I think it all goes back to communication and talking about it. So it's not the leader, saying, here's the rules we're going to have. Let's create these together. How do we want to be? And then post them and review them often so that everybody is reminded. It goes back to that practice. Are we practicing these? Are there any that we have been neglecting that we need to, as a team, work to take to another level? It doesn't have to be hard. It doesn't have to fall on the shoulders of the leader to come up with all of this. In fact, one of my favorite CEOs, Gary Ridge, who was CEO of WD-40, he said his 3 favorite words were, I don't know. He wasn't afraid to admit when he didn't know, because he had people around him that he knew could help come up with or provide the answer. And I think that's the key, is recognizing the capabilities of the people on your team and what each individual brings. And it's, you were talking about that assessment you took, looking at how can we complement each other? So it's not friction. It's a way of collaborating. So we draw on the best of everybody that's on the team.
Yeah. I think that's really important to help everybody show up with all of the value they bring and to bring it together collaboratively. I think that notion of being very open to the value that everyone else brings, like That is a wonderful thing for a leader to do. And then you obviously mentioned communication, and you talked a little bit about the character skills, which that's a really interesting bit of language there that I want to dive into as well. And all of that is kind of underneath some of this new stuff you're doing. You have this Grow Strong Leaders Skill Builder offering, which focuses on the communication and the character skills, which is wonderful. Communication, like you said, it's huge. Certainly in my world of advertising, we are a communications industry that is not good at communication. We've just always struggled in my estimation. And then the character thing is really interesting. So my first question there is, character skills sounds interesting. I don't think we think of character as a skill.
No.
So what's that little bit of language doing there?
Yeah, we consciously chose that because we've been having some other programs where we've talked about character traits, character strengths. The thing is, too often, I think people think you either have it or you don't.
Yeah.
And we wanted to really put it in the perspective of developing character and the various elements in it is like any other skill. The more you practice it, the better you get at it. So it isn't a have or have not. And that is a key area. And what we did is there are so many you could say these are character, areas, but we chose 36 and we put them in 3 different categories, if you will. One is for self. So some of these include self-awareness, self-discipline, self-confidence, but also things like humility and optimism. So ways of being as a human being and also as a leader, that the more you practice doing those, the more effective you can be. The second area is relationships. So these are things like honesty and integrity and commitment and cooperation, where you are looking at yourself in relation to other people and what are the things that you do that can either cement those relationships or could undermine them. And then the third one is around your work ethic. So this could be things like initiative, excellence, and effort. So there are 12 one of those 3 areas. And of course, there's overlap with them. We did it just to not make it simpler than trying to say 36. That's a lot.
Yeah.
And everybody isn't going to be trying to necessarily improve in every one of those, but often we can identify 1 or 2 where if we could really make the effort and the commitment to become more conscious, more aware of how we are, where are the gaps between where we'd like to be and where we currently are? What could we do differently? So our program is giving people specific suggestions on things. It's not conceptual. It's very practical in terms of looking for opportunities where you can demonstrate or use. For instance, let's take patience. That's one most of us can work on.
Absolutely.
But thinking of simple everyday situations where you might be waiting in line. We always are noticing how many cars are in line at Starbucks or other drive-throughs or a bank, ATM machine or a grocery line, but where you really don't have control over the situation. And so how are you going to be in that moment? How could you choose to be more patient? What could you do? You could focus on your breathing, for example. I'm going to take these, breaths or I'm just going to play with noticing. How many people can I notice and pay attention to that I might have overlooked if I hadn't been having to wait? So looking for ways to practice that. And when we do that in these small instances, then we have something big that we have to wait for. We've got some pathways already working there that can serve us as we are going through whatever it is that's causing us to not have control, make the decision and move on things, because so many things are out of our control. That's just one quick example.
I love that example. I mean, I think the standing in line at the supermarket definitely is one I can relate to. And, at my best, I am probably trying to do those things and even think of it as like, oh, this is fun. I get to, people watch a little bit or do, but I also know probably 8 times out of 10, I'm tapping my foot and being frustrated that somebody didn't put their items up in a way that makes it easy for the person to scan them, or somebody's not helping with bagging when it's like, come on, you could totally help. So I think the idea of shifting to sort of a practice mindset of like, what could I do to bring in that skill a little more is awesome. And then I think about the way you've broken it down. It's really cool, kind of like 3 core areas. Is there any part of that where, say, I show up to work with you guys and it's like, okay, I'm ready to dive in and work on my character skills. Is there an assessment part of that process, like, or some way of kind of going like, where might I focus my efforts?
Well, you could look through the list yourself,
Mm-hmm.
and most likely one would pop out at you as, that's a tough one for me.
Yeah.
I don't want to look there.
Yeah, exactly.
That's often a good indication of something you need to work on, is when you look at it and go, ugh, I don't want to do that. But another is, we have our 360 feedback tool, and we have an assessment in there for the character skills. We have another one in there for communication skills. So you could actually do a self-assessment along with getting feedback from, say, your manager, your peers, direct reports, as another way, because, we all have blind spots. There's areas where we think we're doing just fine, thank you. And others would go, oh, but no, you're not. So this kind of information from others can be very valuable. And in fact, if you weren't going to go through a formal process like that, you could take the list and take it around to different people and say, circle the one that you think be my number one, a very simple way to find what others think. And then you have the opportunity to explore with them and thank them and say, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about what difference it would make for you if I would do that. So we're not looking at asking people to go back to history and say, what did I do wrong in that area? We're looking at what would it look like to you if I did that well compared to what I have been doing. And that way you get them picturing the idea of you in that particular skill, and you have a clear picture of what would be meaningful to them. And inviting them to give you that kind of input, because it's really not feedback. I love Marshall Goldsmith's phrase, feed forward. It's this idea of what would it look like in the future if I did that well, so that you're helping them picture what they would really want in addition to you learning, because sometimes they haven't thought about what they really want. They've thought about what they don't want. And so and that then, when you ask a question like that and somebody hesitates, it's so important to be silent. Here's where patience, another application of patience, comes in, because many times we're uncomfortable with silence. We want to fill in the gap, and yet give people the opportunity to think before we ask them to speak, and just wait patiently. They can come up with a much more high quality answer for us. And I think this is one of the things as leaders, when we feel like we're, rushed and pushed, and we've got all these deadlines, I got to get an answer fast, or I need your response fast.
Right.
If we can be, I like this phrase, extend grace to others.
Yeah. I love that phrase.
Come from a place of, it's okay, because some people need more time to think. Others kind of are stream of consciousness, whereas others want that time to ponder a bit before they would give an answer. And so I think giving people the option of, do you need more time to think about this, and we can talk later, like give them the choice of responding quickly or not.
Yeah, there's a lot of kindness in that offering to somebody, and there's a recognition that we are all different in terms of how we process. So by offering that to somebody, you're recognizing, like, even though I might want the answer fast, I recognize you might process differently. There's also something, to use one of your character skills, optimistic. There's something very optimistic in the mindset shift of, looking back at what I didn't like versus looking forward to what would change if somebody showed up with more patience. What changes? Like, it is both a more positive mindset, but it's suddenly like you see what's possible.
Yes.
And if you keep sort of reinforcing that behavior and keep opening it up to, what would change if I brought more of whatever you would like me to bring more of, it not only helps me change as a leader, but it helps the people on your team immediately see so much more possibility, and they can think in terms of what could change if we all think about how we could, step into some different character skills for ourselves. And if we're open about having that conversation with each other versus feeling stuck, like my boss doesn't like to do this, or my boss doesn't support me in this way, or my boss is too impatient, or my boss is too whatever, to what would happen if my boss was more optimistic, more patient. It's just a complete, shift in how you see what might be possible for yourself as a team, as an organization, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and another question that a leader could ask folks is simply, and I think giving context is important. So before you would ask a question like this, you'd want to say, I'm really working to become a more effective leader, more effective person.
Yeah.
What is one thing I could do differently that would be a better experience for you working with me? And the opportunity again to think, get back to you later, whatever. And that's kind of broader than even giving them a list of 36 things, but asking a question to see, are there some themes coming from the different people that you ask this of, so that there's an overall level of input for you. And, one other quick thing is, we need to be careful about labeling, even using that word fixed mindset and growth mindset. It's a convenient way of talking about people and their thinking. But in reality, we're never all of one thing or another. We can have a growth mindset about certain things, but be kind of closed about others. And so I think in general, it's important to be careful about what labels we put on others or ourselves. My favorite authors is Steve Chandler. I've probably read 18 of his books. And one of the themes in all of them is this idea of, if you say things like, oh, I never finish anything, or, I never this, or I'm always that, examine that and really look at, is that true?
Yeah.
Is that true? Are there instances where, in fact, you do finish things? And really simple. I fixed a meal, I put on my shoes, I got dressed. If you look at these areas, then you realize how superficial it is to put a label on yourself or label someone else. We all have the creative ability to be more. And I'm not saying I could be a basketball player. I'm not talking about that. But in terms of show up and who I'm being in any given moment, it's always a choice.
Yeah. That's a really powerful shift there. And I think it's wonderful advice to sort of recognize when we are putting those labels on, because I know I do it all the time, both towards myself as well as towards others. And recognizing on some level, it's almost silly once you put it down to like, I never finish anything. Of course I finish things. Like, it's so silly. Of course I do. I never do this, or I always do this. Like, whoever, always or never does something, it's almost impossible. So that you can almost laugh at it and then allow yourself to recognize, okay, that's not maybe serving me to put those labels on myself or others. Therefore, what learning? Let me now get curious about some of this stuff and think about where, is there room for me to improve in certain areas? Great. What does that look like, more so versus trapping ourselves in the label? Because what I hear is if I say I never finish things, I'm probably not going to finish as many things. Right. You're creating that reality. And to your point about like, I know, like, I'm not going to be a pro basketball player. Okay. But the notion of, that's more like in that kind of be, do, have thing. That's like, that's more of a doing thing. I'm playing basketball. But in terms of who I'm being, like I can be more gracious, I can be more kind, I can be more patient. I can be any of those things that I choose to be. And then, that may help me decide what do I want to do and what do I want to have in my life. But I think if you can kind of start with the like, who am I going to be today? It sets the table kind of in a nice way for yourself, and it opens it up a lot more.
Absolutely. It does. It's powerful. Just to think before you start, you jump out of bed and you start doing. I like to start with, who am I going to be today? And then I can look at my task list. But before I get to that, I want to focus on creating the person I want to be that day. And it doesn't have to take a lot of time.
Right.
But it's time well spent.
I agree. And I think, I know we've touched on some of the character skills, and we've probably mentioned a few of the communication skills, but I want to just put a little more of a spotlight on that.
Sure.
Before we start maybe wrapping things up here. I think, you mentioned listening to understand. I think we talked a little bit about feedback and the communication around that. Maybe even the idea of expressing.
Actually, 3 kinds of feedback that we talk about in the book. The one we talked about is expressing appreciation, where you are recognizing the value of someone and then giving feedback constructively in a way that's encouraging to someone else, even when you need to address a behavior or a mistake that was, consequential. And then the third one is receiving feedback, where you are willing to listen without getting defensive, arguing, defending, and hear what someone else has to say. I think those are 3 areas of feedback that what we have seen is a lot of leaders are uncomfortable with those. Part of it is what was modeled for us growing up. And in other jobs, this isn't something that is necessarily practiced actively in the various settings we've had up to this point. Some other ones include just asking questions, helping people learn to think for themselves so that we're not the answer person.
I love
and
that.
we ask them things like, well, what have you thought about so far? If they're used to coming to you with a problem and you giving the answer, then you're creating dependence and you're robbing them of the opportunity to really hash out things for themselves. And by the way, this is true for parents also.
Sure.
That if we want to raise children who are independent, critical thinkers, we've got to give them the practice to do that as they're growing up. And so we can provide that same opportunity to people at work. And so you can kind of train people. You don't come to me with a question until you've thought through the answer yourself or the options. So that when I ask you, what options have you considered so far? What are the pros and cons of each? Which one would you recommend? Then gone through some thinking before you come to me, and often could have solved it yourself. So we're teaching them resourcefulness. And that is such a strength, because then it frees up your time to do other things. You're not having a revolving door of people coming to you to solve all their problems. So I think that asking questions is a key leadership skill.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely connects with me, certainly with the coaching work I do. I mean, that's all built around, trying to ask really smart questions, powerful questions that get people to recognize their own resourcefulness, their own creativity. I love that you use that word in a number of areas, because I think our creativity is something that people don't realize how important it is and how much we can tap into that as a leader. I think about, again, my world of advertising. You have people who are working creatively to solve problems and come up with cool ideas and fun ideas. And then somebody says, okay, I want you to now become a leader. And in some ways, there's almost a mourning period in there of like, oh, I no longer get to do the creative stuff. So the creative part of my identity almost feels like it's lost. And what I hear, and so much of what you're saying here, is you're applying your creativity differently. Whether that's, being creative with the way you think about asking questions to people that help them become more resourceful, being creative. One of the things you have here is resolving conflict creatively. Like, what an interesting and fun problem to solve those conflicts that inevitably show up at work, how can we be creative in that process versus the way we normally show up, which is sort of the opposite of creative, kind of digging in. What I'm actually curious in that space, when you think about resolving conflict creatively, how does that get sort of nurtured, and what does that look like to be creative around resolving a conflict?
Well, the first step is realizing what each of us is stating we want doesn't necessarily get what our real need is. So the thing is understanding, I know what you're saying you want. Talk to me more about what need is this fulfilling for you? And then you be willing to share the same thing with that other person. And if you, this usually conflicts are around actions that we're going to take as opposed to opinions we have. You know, conflict, I want to do this, you want to do that.
Right.
So when we each understand each other's needs and we see there's still a gap, then how about if we do some brainstorming, see what ideas we can come up with, and we're not going to judge them initially. We're just going to brainstorm and write down all of the ideas we can come up with as a way that we can meet both of our needs. Even though it may not be what either one of us right now is saying, there may be another thing we haven't thought of yet. So let's get creative about possibilities. And so just brainstorm until you're both run out of ideas. And then you look at each one of those and you say, well, which ones are acceptable to you? Which ones would you say a thumbs up to? Because we don't really want compromise where I'm giving up some, you're giving up some. No, we both want to feel good about whatever it is that we come up with as the solution or agreement. So it's a process of whittling it down to whatever number are left where we both say we could live with those. We would be happy with that. And then choose which one you're going to do as a result of that. And sometimes you need a facilitator if the, you know, if the conflict has been long-standing or it's, you know, it's deep for whatever reason. Sometimes it helps to have a third party facilitate that kind of brainstorming and discussion because there really are solutions if both people will keep an open mind and not feel they have to have exactly what they're demanding in order to win. If we, again, it's who am I being? If we both come at it with the willingness to stay open and have the commitment to it's got to be a win for both of us, for us to walk away and both feel good about that. I think that's the key.
Yeah, I think that's another wonderful way of thinking about communication in a new and different way. And one I could see where practice would really make a big difference and even again, kind of shift you into a more optimistic mindset about the idea of conflict, because conflict is not inherently bad. In fact, it can be really good because it can be, as you talk about it, it's generative. It is two people come together, we're kind of stuck, and then you get into this creative mindset and suddenly new possibilities emerge. New possibilities that might be better than anything we would have thought of if either of us just sort of either acquiesced or compromised and kind of shrunk what either one of us wanted. It's suddenly like, let's expand what's possible through this creative process. So then the next time conflict happens, it's like, okay. So this may not be it. What could be it? And then let's do that. So that it welcomes the idea of conflict in a way as a source of creation, as opposed to a source of shutting things down.
And, you know, that's such an important point, TJ. And again, it's part of our human experience to have conflict. You know, we're not all agree on everything. And this willingness to hear what's important to someone else and start evaluating how important is this really for me? You know, is it a deal breaker? Is it something that's not that important? So it's no big deal. Again, we get kind of circling back. We get our egos wrapped around being, having our way, not wanting to look bad, all those things. If we can set them aside and just say, what's the best thing to do here for everyone? And it frees us up to think more creatively and be more willing to hear out what's really important to someone else.
Yeah, I can picture that. And I've been fortunate enough to experience a little bit of that in my career, but I also can look back and think of a bunch of instances popping up in my brain where I'm like, man, I wish I had that mindset then, because I can now picture what might have been possible. So now I'll just try to carry it forward with me. I want to share a couple of things that we maybe don't have time to dig into too much, but I really love this book about peer coaching. And maybe we can just do a quick highlight of what is peer coaching and how does it maybe help an organization?
Great. So the reality is every person can benefit from a coach.
Mm-hmm.
In organizations, many people, at the executive level get coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes another layer or two down, but it's unheard of really for everyone to have a coach.
Mm-hmm.
And yet the benefits of a coach include being held accountable,
mm-hmm.
and then also getting support and encouragement. As you're trying to do hard things, as you're trying to make changes, it's
Mm-hmm.
really helpful to have one person that is in your corner that you can talk to on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm.
So we came up with this book on peer coaching made simple because we really believe peer coaching is a way to provide that coach to every person in an organization. And it isn't complicated.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to be certified in order to do it. You first of all need to care about the other person. You need
Mm-hmm.
to have some sense of commitment to each other
Mm-hmm.
about your success. And
Mm-hmm.
then it's a matter of using some of the skills that we've been talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Listening, asking questions like,
Mm-hmm.
did you do what you said you were going to do last time we met? You said you were
Mm-hmm.
going to do this. Talk to me about how it went.
Right.
And then asking questions like, well, what did you learn from that? Did it go the way you wanted it to? So listening, asking questions, offering encouragement if they've had a setback, if it didn't go well,
Mm-hmm.
being willing to point out their strong points and
Mm-hmm.
what is possible, and not minimize the setback they had, but help them feel uplifted by the conversation and not leave more discouraged than they came. And so it's a fairly simple thing of, did you do what you said you were going to do? And let's talk about how it went. And then what are you going to do next time?
Mm-hmm.
So that you both have a clear picture. So you swap, a opportunity to be coach versus coachee in that conversation. And so that kind of regular meeting accountability, that rhythm really helps bring to your conscious level throughout every day. I'm going to be talking to TJ next week. I better make sure I am practicing and doing what I said I would do. It's sort of like, working with a personal trainer at the gym or in some kind of weight loss program. There's these intermittent connection points where you're expected to have been doing some things in between, and it just helps you stay on track and have that kind of a support system. We all need it.
Yeah, I love all of that. I mean, I think you're both describing the benefits of coaching in general, but I think the way you've talked about it in the book, it's a very democratizing way of bringing coaching to more people by allowing the organization to kind of find coaching within itself and have it support each other that way. So there's something, again, beautifully generative about that notion that you're sort of expanding the possibility and bringing coaching to more people. So I love that. I wanted to just show people also this book, which is about those top 10 communication skills, which we've obviously talked a lot about. Connect with your team is the main title there. And it's also, there's a new book coming, I think, as you're saying, your partner is writing about the character skills.
It's called Grow Strong Character. And of course, our company is Grow Strong Leaders. So we thought, let's enforce that, Grow Strong Character, because I think it's an encouraging title. You can grow, you can, strengthen these various character skills over time. And so it's a very practical guide. Denny has each chapter start with a personal story of himself, either, not doing this so well, or an experience he's had around that particular character skill, and then explaining what it is, why it's important, and giving specific examples of ways that you can apply that skill in a variety of situations in your life. And our new program called GSL Skill Builder is all about giving you specific exercises, practicing, and working with a coach to help you strengthen those skills over time.
Yeah, I love that. There's something remarkably practical and tangible about I think in both cases, communication and character, you're bringing it down to a very practical, tangible level. I think it's remarkably unexpected in the character side, as you said, because we think you're kind of just born with what you've got and it shows up as best you can. And the idea that you can do exercises and create a practice around developing those character skills, they're not traits that we had, they're skills that we can build and muscles we can develop. Again, it's a mindset shift of, oh, I guess I'm just not that, or kind of to use that old language, I'm never this, I'm never that. It's like, no, I'm never patient. I'm not patient. I can be patient. I can work on being more patient. And then imagine the impact that's going to have on the people who work with me, work for me, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I love the very achievable stuff that you're putting into it, rather than it just being, here's what it looks like to be a person of character. It's like, no, here's what you do to create the character skills you need to be a better leader, which is a much more empowering approach.
Yes. And you're saying that just made me think, you can use your whole team as your coaches, because you can tell them up front, I am working on my patience. I am working on my integrity of following through with my promises, of keeping my commitments. And so I want you to call me on it if you see me not being in alignment with what I've committed to, because I am working on this and I'm not conscious about everything I do that might be out of alignment. So I need your help. And when you solicit people to be on your side with you, to help you with that, and then you thank them when they say, oh yeah, you didn't do this, or you were late for that, or whatever it is. If you thank them and you express appreciation and you ask for more of that, you're going to be raising your own awareness level around that. And they're going to be looking for opportunities to acknowledge you when you do it well. And so it's another way of building up the team by getting these commitments with each other about how we want to be. So there's just a lot of power there. And it comes back to that whole loving each other. We care enough about each other to do that for each other.
Yeah. And it's a very action-oriented way of being in that space of love, by saying, I am inviting you to contribute to my growth by helping me see, where I'm maybe not living up to some of these skills that I'm trying to build. And then, if you notice something good, that's great too. All of that is the action that comes out of the being from love. So I think that's really cool and beautiful. I want to quickly touch on your podcast. I know we're going way over time here, but I'm having a lot of fun. And I just wanted to, first off, your podcast is doing really well, which is amazing. I think you said something like it's in the top 2.5% of global podcasts, which is amazing. I was going to ask you what your secret is, but after talking to you for an hour and 20 minutes here, I think I know your secret, because I see how you show up and I see how you are. And again, you're coming from that space of love and you're bringing a lot of generosity to the table. And I imagine people are feeling that. But is there anything else you think that's kind of attracting people to what you are offering through the podcast?
I don't have a set of questions that I ask every guest.
Yeah.
And it's fun because I tell them in our pre-interview call, I want to bring out your unique brilliance. And of course, I get a chuckle, but I'm curious because every one of us has something really special. So in that pre-interview call, I'm finding out what causes their eyes to really sparkle, right? Passion is coming out, and we can touch on those things. So I have a sort of a structure in terms of topics I know we want to touch on, sort of like you and I did,
Mm-hmm.
but the conversation just like this is really more organic. It just
Yeah.
flows naturally. So I
Mm-hmm.
like to say I get into the spirit of it with
Yeah.
the other person. And
Mm-hmm.
so we just get into this flow.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I think they feel that. And then my audience feels that.
Mm-hmm.
And so for the person who's interested in growing strong leaders in
Yeah.
their organization and growing strong as a leader themselves, I
Mm-hmm.
think the conversations that I have touch the heart,
Mm-hmm.
not just the mind.
Mm-hmm.
It's the idea of what can we bring out that will inspire people
Mm-hmm.
to become better themselves and also encourage others to be the best that they can be. And
Mm-hmm.
I've just also been inspired to listen to other podcasts. And when I hear someone speaking and
Mm-hmm.
they say things that I think, oh, my audience needs to hear that, I'll just reach out and invite them.
Oh,
So
that's
I
cool.
have no hesitation, fear
Mm-hmm.
about reaching out to someone because you know what? I've learned a lot, TJ, about hearing the word no. I
Mm-hmm.
used to take that personally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they were rejecting me. What's wrong with me? Where am I not measuring? All that nonsense. When the
Mm-hmm.
fact is, if they say no, it's just a no for now, or it's not a fit.
Yeah.
And so I accept the reality of what's happening and I move on because I always anticipate there's something even better.
Uh,
It's waiting for me. There's another door that will open. I'm
mm-hmm.
not relying on this one person as my be all and end all, and I don't attach my well-being to their answer.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful, I think. And I think I can see how you could get into that mindset. So it's very helpful to kind of have a more open and compassionate towards yourself mindset of like, if it's meant to be, we'll connect and we'll have a wonderful conversation. If not, maybe later or maybe never, and that's okay. I was curious, like, is there anybody currently where you're like, ooh, I'd love to get them on? Is there any sort of dream guest that you haven't reached out to yet that we can put out into the universe?
Oh, you know, I don't, I'm not thinking of anybody
Okay.
right at this moment because usually I'll reach out to someone when
Yeah.
it occurs to me that
Okay.
I kind of trust my intuition
Mm-hmm.
about this. If there's somebody that I think would be good and I reach out to them and I don't get a response, I will think about, well, is there somebody else that might have a
Mm-hmm.
connection
Right.
that could open that door? But if I keep finding closed doors, I don't keep banging.
Yeah, no, I get that. Yeah. Well, all I'll say is let's put some energy out there that there are more interesting folks that continue to show up in your sphere that you then feel excited to reach out to. Because I think I can imagine it's pretty fun to be on a podcast, where you're the host. I can picture that being really, really cool. Um, as we kind of wrap things up here, there's a couple questions I like to ask. One of which is, and I know we've kind of gotten into a lot of this, but if you could wave a magic wand and kind of strip away all the suck from the world of work and fully desuckify it, what does that world look like?
Thought about this. It's one where people speak possibilities into each other.
Mm,
So they are always looking for where is the greatness in this person and how can I draw it out?
mm,
How can I help them see the gold that's within themselves that they may not have discovered yet?
mm,
That to me, if everyone had that attitude of where's the gold in this person and how can I draw it out,
mm-hmm.
it would just make a huge difference in how they interact with each other.
Yeah, I love that, and I can picture that. Um, it is a relatively simple mindset shift that we can all adopt, and as a practice as well, where we can practice it every day and show up. Okay, let me think about and let me talk to this person. Let's try to discover the gold in every person I talk to. Soon enough, that starts to get some traction, and I think the desuckification starts to really happen at a rapid pace if we can encourage that. So yeah, I
And we
love
can
that.
practice this in simple places like the grocery store.
Mm-hmm.
I have it's again, practicing in these little ways, but saying to someone, gosh, you were so efficient. Thank you so
Mhm.
much. Or
Yeah.
you have a beautiful smile. I
Hmm.
love seeing you smile just now. These little things that we can point out to others that no one ever talks to them about.
Hmm. Yeah.
Just, we can make someone's day with such a simple statement.
I totally believe that. And it's a good reminder because I feel like there are times when I have the thought, but I don't articulate it, right? You're online and that person is being really efficient or they're being super friendly. And it's like, wow, this is really wonderful how friendly you're being. You make this experience so much better than I imagined it could be. Like, how hard is that to say? But sometimes we keep those thoughts to ourselves. And we forget just how much of an impact it could have on that other person.
This happened to me, TJ, doing a chat with an online retail store. I was on the chat asking about an order that we had placed.
Mm-hmm.
And just through chat, because I was saying, oh, I appreciate your efficiency and getting back to me with such a quick answer. I wrote probably 3 or 4 different positive things to the person during our interaction. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end, when she was signing off, she said, thank you for one of the best conversations I've ever had.
Wow.
Because she's used to being attacked by people and
Mm-hmm.
complained by people. She's only trying to do her job. And
Of
so if
course.
we take, again, that attitude of love towards this person and not assume they're trying to, mess with us or, rip us off or anything like that, give people the benefit of
Mm-hmm.
the doubt
Yeah.
up front. And so they have an opportunity to shine.
Yeah, that word grace you mentioned earlier shows up, right? Being showing up with grace and giving people some grace. Well, speaking of showing up, are you ready to show up with a sound effect to add to our little desuckified sound library?
Yes, it's a kind of a mix between a word and a sound effect.
Okay,
Ka-ching, ka-ching.
I
And
love
the
that.
reason I say that is because it reminds us of the value
Mm,
that people bring.
mm,
There's monetary value. There's, thinking of bringing the register, bringing in cash, bringing in value to
mm-hmm.
everyone, and
Yeah,
recognizing the value that everyone brings to you and your organization.
that's amazing, and I love that. Again, it's an interesting shift from ringing up the register or somebody thinking about value in terms of money and going back to what you've just kind of talked about, which is seeing the value in every person and even kind of maybe mentally having that sound like to reinforce this idea that it's fun and it's generous and it's wonderful to show up in a way that you see and encourage and nurture the value in everyone around you. That's really cool. Well, Meredith, the last thing I always like to ask is, how do people find you? How do people get to know more about all this awesome work you're doing?
Well, our website is growstrongleaders.com.
Okay.
And people can learn about our 360 and another program that we have, and Skill Builder will be there soon. And
Mm-hmm.
I'm also on LinkedIn,
Mm-hmm.
Facebook, and Twitter or X.
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn is probably where I am most active, and that's a
Okay.
great place to connect with me.
Awesome. Yeah, your content on LinkedIn is wonderful. It's always very thought provoking and always, it's often very timely to kind of break you out of like a little bit of negative thinking that you could be trapped in. You have some really good, helpful thoughts that can go, okay, yeah, I think I could embrace some of that and just shift my thinking a little bit. So I highly recommend people follow you on LinkedIn, and of course, check out your website, check out your books. They're all awesome. You are doing amazing things, and in a time where I think people are feeling some struggles and feeling some challenges, and there's probably a need more than ever for strong leaders to kind of help nurture with the value and the possibility in all of us. You are doing incredibly important work. So thank you so much for what you're doing. And thank you for coming on and just having a really fun, awesome conversation.
Oh, it was great. Thank you, TJ, for your wonderful questions, for your excellent listening. It was a delight.
Awesome. Thanks, Meredith. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to the DesuckifyWork Podcast. And thanks to Meredith for bringing love, light, and lucidity to the show. You can follow Meredith on LinkedIn and check out her site at growstrongleaders.com, where you can learn more about their assessments, development tools, and books. You'll also find all 276 and counting episodes of the Grow Strong Leaders podcast, which Meredith hosts as well.
Ka-ching.
Once you've explored all that, I'd love it if you took a look at my site and my Substack newsletter. They're both focused on bringing creativity to our biggest problems at work, like poor communication, high turnover, and the fact that I always seem to get 8 and 2 on the company's Super Bowl box pool. Want to solve some of these problems? Let's set up a free half-hour Desuckify discovery session. Bye, everyone.